YouTube, it's Faye, and for today's video, I just want to start by pointing out the fact that I now have 10,000 subscribers, which is insane. So to celebrate 10,000 subscribers, I decided that I would fulfill some viewer requests, one of which was more of the chicken. I would have brought the other chicken too, but she was laying an egg right now, and they don't like to be disturbed when they're doing that, so got Willow with me today. The second request was do the how portion. Like, how did I know that Grimm was going to be a good truck? So that is what I'm going to discuss today. The how. How did I know that it was okay to buy my truck and that everything would work out well? Go ahead, Willow. So I had a few goals for the truck. The first one was it had to fit my budget of $2,500. Seems reasonable, right? But when you consider that I need to also be able to do all the repairs for $2,500 as well, whatever it needs has to fit in that budget too. That makes things a little bit more complicated when you're trying to pick a running, driving vehicle, which is the second thing I needed. Was the pull apart where I got Grimm was 3 hours south. So I had to at least be able to drive 3 hours right off the bat. So that basically rules out any major engine problems or transmission problems. So I had to do a few tests to make sure that both those things were okay, keeping in mind that I couldn't actually drive to verify that the transmission was any good. So that was a little bit sketchy. Ruling out any potential problems with the engine was pretty straightforward for me. First of all, thanks again so much to the folks at Pull Apart. They held the key for me when I said I was gonna come get the truck for sure. So no one else had the opportunity to start up the truck. So when I got there, it had been sitting cold. No one had started it for a while, and that's when you need to do all these tests. So that's something to keep in mind. I mean, also for buying a car anytime, you never want someone to have, oh, I got it running for you and all warmed up so you can test drive it. That's not appropriate. That's not good. You don't want that to happen. First of all, I started the truck and immediately went to the tailpipe and I looked for any sort of abnormal smoke. I also listened for any hard start issues. So did it run rough for like the first few revolutions or the first few seconds of it running? Up the tailpipe, did I smell any odd smells? Did I see any weird colored smoke? So for example, when a vehicle first starts up and you see a puff of blue smoke, burning oil, or a puff of white smoke burning coolant, those can both be signs of internal engine issues. I was more concerned about the white smoke in this case because these can blow head gaskets, they can also crack heads, and even though both of those would be relatively straightforward and easy jobs for me to do, I just didn't have the time. I wanted to be able to buy a vehicle and just drive it, you know, and have the biggest job that I had to worry about be the timing belt. After I started the vehicle, I went around to the tailpipe and smelled, which I guess I shouldn't technically advise you to do as a professional. I shouldn't be like, sniff the exhaust. Don't do that. But the smoke came up pretty clear. Obviously it had been sitting and it was wet, so I did see like a little bit of moisture in the tailpipe, but I didn't smell any maple syrup, any sweet sort of smells coming out the tailpipe, so that was a good sign. Then I instantly turned off the vehicle, and the next thing that I did while the engine was still cold was a pressure test. Now some of you saw me using this tool, and a couple of you asked me, why the heck did you use that tool? This is a coolant pressure tester, and the reason I got it, or brought it, the reason why I bought it was kind of for this too, but the reason why I brought it to the salvage yard to test on the vehicle was because this is actually how I found out that the head gasket in my Supra was bad. I applied pressure to the cooling system. So this, there's an attachment on the end, which you saw me use. Here it is. There's an attachment you put on the end, and it obviously goes on the top of the radiator, or there's a bunch of different attachments. This is actually the whole, I have the whole ATD kit. Oh, this thing is freaking awesome. It has attachments for everything, and then you apply pressure to the cooling system. Okay, so now I've got my coolant pressure tester in place. I'm just checking out my radiator cap, which a little broken. I think I'm gonna have to find another one. Maybe hopefully there's one on the yard I can scope. But I've got 88 kPa in kilopascals, or 0.9 bar. I'm gonna go with 0.9 bar. So I'm just gonna, got 0.5, 0.1, just gonna sort of pump this up to. So I made a note, whatever the pressure was supposed to hold, and then I went a little bit bit above it, but you don't want it to go too far above it because you can cause damage, because it's only meant to hold that much pressure. So, and then I'll walk away for like 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour, and then I'll come back and I'll see if it's changed. So I'm just gonna let it sit there while I'm checking out other things on the car, then I can come back, check for coolant leaks, or see if it's actually gone down at all. If it's changed, you look around and see, are there any external cooling system leaks, right? Because the pressure has to go somewhere. And in my case, I did find an external cooling system pressure leak, and that was coming from my cracked radiator with the JB weld. I didn't know that that radiator was gonna have JB weld on it. I mean, I didn't know anything about the truck. You see pictures on the outside of it, so I did not know what to anticipate. So I ended up doing a test and determined that the radiator was busted. But you can also use that to check for head gasket leaks, because obviously if there is not an external leak, there's gonna be an internal coolant leak. Now, just because there is a leak that you detect, but it's not external, you don't see it, it doesn't automatically mean it's a head gasket either. It could be another thing, which is actually, I don't know if it's worse or not, it might be worse actually, is on automatic vehicles, a lot of times on a lot of cars, the transmission cooler is integrated into the radiator. So sometimes the coolant can be going into the transmission too. So basically, if you lose a lot of pressure, and no coolant is coming out of the engine, you got a problem. So actually, after replacing the radiator on Grimm, I did this test again, and everything was awesome. However, I had bought Grimm before I did the second test, so how did I know that my head gasket wasn't bad? Well, I actually brought a second test with me, and that is this, which I got off the Snap-on truck and probably paid way too much money for. I'm sure that there are cheaper versions, but this is a freaking awesome tool. I actually bought this tool because I was in denial that my Supra had a blown head gasket. Anyway, this tool is amazing. I don't know if you can rent it anywhere, but if you can, if someone knows, leave a comment in the description below. So basically how this works is, actually I'll show you in the vehicle, but you've got this funky little chamber set up and you've got this cool fluid, combustion leak fluid, and you can buy this from Napa. You don't actually have to buy this from Snap-on. But basically this fluid changes color when it detects combustion gases. And what's actually cool about this is it works not only for gas, but I think also, oh yeah, so test fluid turns yellow for gas, and test fluid turns green for diesel. I'll just show you how to set this up and I'll show you how it works. Okay, so on a cold engine, probably wasn't that cold, your radiator cup, and you don't want to get any of the coolant in with the combustion testing fluid. So if you have a little spill like I did, grab some rags, clean it up. Try not to get it on your drive belt, because then you're gonna make some noise. Okay, and here's how this works. There's 3 pieces, and they have, ooh, wear safety glasses. So there are 2 pieces, and they both have a little line, and you just fill both of these little chambers to the line with this combustion testing fluid. And you place it like so. There are many designs out there that only have 1 chamber. However, whoops. However, I like the dual chamber one, because that way if something happens and coolant does get in this bottom one and cause it to change color, I'll know that it was contaminated, because I'll be able to just compare it with the top one, you know? So that's nice. And then the third part is this guy. So I'm going to place that on there, form a seal, and then that is how you put it together. Then, just make sure that I have enough coolant removed here. You put this on top of the radiator like so. Actually, you don't want any of these things on here like this. Just squeeze, suck up some air, which of course, whoops, you can tell that I got some coolant in there. So as it runs, the gases will just sort of push up through there, especially if you hold it down firmly onto the radiator, which you should. But if that is an issue, then what you do is you just squeeze on this balloon and it will like suck it up anyway. There's no problems with my truck, so it stayed this color and it will stay this color no matter how many times I do it. But you can also test and see if this works by putting this on your exhaust tailpipe. So let me show you. Okay, and for a gasoline car, if this was to be on the radiator and detect this stuff, you know, up there, obviously that would signify a blown head gasket, and so you get this color. So lastly, if you're just like stuck in a bind and you don't have any of these tools whatsoever, you can always just check the condition of the oil. It wasn't looking peanut buttery. Of course, that would have been a terrible blown head gasket. You can also check the condition of the coolant. You're gonna end up with something like this. I drained this out of a newer Toyota. You can tell because of the pink coolant. This is head gasket goo. This is what happens when you blow a head gasket, and this can actually, if you don't solve this problem right away, it can cause significant engine bearing damage, which is a pain in the butt. So that's why if I had a blown head gasket, I wouldn't have just driven on it. I would have wanted to repair it right away. So, yummy. Since oil floats, a lot of times it's easy to see any sort of weird residue in the coolant overflow. Sometimes if you take out the little hose that goes into the coolant reservoir, you can also see some traces of oil on that tube. That's another way. Or if you check the oil, sometimes you can tell that the oil will start to look like this peanut butter, like this frothy color. I mean, this froth isn't just caused from head gasket damage. If you see that, like, it's not always a bad sign, but it just basically means that you want to do another test or 5 to see if you have a blown head gasket. But those 3 were what I used for testing the engine. The coolant pressure tester, the combustion leak tester, and then obviously doing a visual inspection of both my coolant and my oil. At this point, I think it's worth buying. Now for the transmission, I was not quite so lucky. Obviously I couldn't perform the tests that I normally do or that I wanted to, so it definitely was a bit of a gamble. All that I could really do was test and make sure that it shifted properly. So I was able to move the vehicle forward and backward in the parking spot at pull apart, and so going from gear to gear, I could tell that it shifted like a hard shift. Like, was I being sort of jerked around, or was it a smooth shift? And did it move nicely from a stop, basically, was all I could do. I did notice some harsh shifting. However, upon inspection of the undercarriage, I realized that I have a couple motor mounts and the transmission mount are just totally worn and need to be replaced. So I realized that as I was doing that, it was more of like the engine and transmission that was moving and causing like a thud rather than anything happening internal to the transmission. Also, I inspected my fluid. I smelled the fluid, made sure that it didn't smell burnt at all, and I inspected the color, and I also inspected for any sort of crazy particles floating around. Some of you may have seen, if you follow me on Instagram, I love to post pictures of carnage. I posted some recently of some pretty gnarly transmission with some chunks in there and some shinies. So I was just looking for obvious signs, man. Obvious signs that my transmission was in danger, and I did not see any crazy obvious signs. Also, from doing a little bit of research, these transmissions will have some problems, but rare. A lot of times too, if there is a shifting problem, it has more to do with the electronics or the solenoids rather than the actual transmission. Another thing that I did was I used a couple tools to identify what are the most common problems with these vehicles. First of all, I got on a bunch of 4Runner forums. I've been on them anyway, but I got on some more. And I started researching, like, what are people's biggest problems with these? Especially if I was gonna be in a salvage yard, I wanted to pull off as many parts as may go wrong on my drive back, right? So I grabbed an airflow meter, I grabbed some injectors, I don't know, anything, you know, some coils. Oh, can you see my coils? So there they are. I grabbed some coil. I didn't know what might fail on my drive back. I don't know the last time that the truck was even ran, so anything could have happened. But I did a search on forums, saw what the most common problems were. I also subscribed to Identifix, so as soon as I type a VIN into Identifix, you can see, if you just drop down the search menu, what the most common issues are. So I was able to look through the most common issues or the most common searches that technicians had on this vehicle, just so I could verse myself and make sure I could prepare for those things. I also use a tool called Repair Pal, and you can put in your make and model and see what the most common issues on that vehicle are, the most common search things, or the most common repairs needed. And I mean, none of those are like the perfect tool for anything, but if you use all of them in combination in order to do some research, sometimes that can help you too. So those are the main things that I did to make sure that Grimm is a good vehicle. Obviously, you saw me do my multi-point inspection. I checked the tires, I checked the suspension, I checked the brakes, all of those things that are just, anyone could do just to make sure that the basics are covered. I did have super low brakes and one of my calipers was sticking. I did have really bad tires. I needed to replace all 4 tires. I did realize that the oil needed to be changed. I mean, it was overdue for its 90K service, which is a big deal. So I'm pretty much going through with every single service. But aside from that, oh, and I replaced the radiator, which you saw, but like, big deal. In fact, I just took the keys, $1,200 later. They took care of everything with like getting my plates. I got my free battery. I paid $99 for the tires. I had tires mounted and balanced for $10 a wheel. And then I got my radiator for like $120, got a couple bottles of coolant, and got some wiper blades. And that was all it took for me to get a new work truck and drive 3 hours home. And after that, I really didn't do anything for like a couple weeks. I replaced my steering wheel, but like that was cosmetic and it made me happy to do. Now I finally just got around to doing the brakes. A differential service. I flushed the coolant mostly just to look at the timing belt and make sure that it actually needed to be done. It did, but that's pretty much been it, and I've owned the truck now for 2 months and I have not even gotten anywhere close to my $2,500 limit. So, I mean, part of it was luck, but also part of it was just like preparing really well. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if there's anything more that you want to know about the test that I did and the how, please just leave me a comment below and I will try my best to read it and respond to it as I can. And I will see you in my next video. Okay, bye! Oh, and per 10K request, here is a chicken compilation. Hmm.